All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into DOGE.
DOGE.
Yes, DOGE. Not the meme coin, though.
Right.
We're talking about the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah.
The one Elon Musk is running, set up by Trump in his second term, to cut waste in the government, basically.
Yeah, that was the big promise.
It was, and we've got a whole stack of sources here.
Oh,
Newsweek, Fox News, legal analogies, even DOGE's own reports, and
it's a lot.
it's a lot. It's kind of all over the place. So we are going to unpack it all for you.
Okay.
The big claims, the actual dollar amounts, all the legal trouble they're running into.
Right.
So you can decide what's really going on.
It's become such a lightning rod, hasn't it?
It really has.
This whole DOGE thing, you've got Trump and Musk saying they're finding billions and billions.
Right.
Maybe even close to $1 trillion.
A trillion with a T.
Wasted government money.
Yeah, that's definitely a headline grabber.
Absolutely.
I mean, who doesn't want to hear that taxpayers are getting a massive win?
Right. But, of course, it's
No.
never that simple, is it?
Probably not. So what's the catch?
Well, a lot of those figures they're throwing around,
Yeah.
those are projections.
Okay.
Not fully audited numbers.
So like when a company talks about how much money it's going to make,
Yeah.
sounds great.
Sounds fantastic.
Until you actually see...
Until you see the books.
Yeah, right. So let's get into some specifics. What are some concrete cuts that DOGE's actually made?
Okay, so Newsweek had a few examples that added up to about $16.5 billion.
Okay.
Biggest one, USAID.
USAID.
$6.5 billion in cuts.
Wow.
Claimed cuts, at least.
Claim cuts. Okay.
Department of Education was another target.
Okay.
They say they trimmed about $502 million there.
Okay, that's still...
A chunk of change.
Yeah. But I was reading an NPR piece, and they were suggesting that the real savings might be way lower.
Oh, really?
Like maybe only $2 billion.
Wow.
And they even said that a lot of these contracts that DOGE wants to get rid of,
Yeah.
they wouldn't actually save money if they were just terminated.
Interesting. So why is there such a big difference then?
That's what I'm wondering. What's going on there?
It seems like DOGE is using a different way of calculating those savings.
Okay, how so?
They might be factoring in things that traditional audits don't normally look at.
Like what?
Future cost avoidance, maybe potential revenue,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
So it's not just about finding money that's been, like, lost or stolen.
Not necessarily, no.
It's more about finding smarter ways to spend going forward,
Right, potentially, yeah.
even if it ruffles some feathers in the present.
Yeah, you could say that.
Speaking of ruffling feathers, some of these examples that DOGE is highlighting are pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
That Fox News article
No,
had some real head scratchers.
it did.
Okay, the one that like blew my mind
Dummy.
was Iron Mountain.
Oh, yeah.
They're processing federal retirements by hand
By hand.
in a limestone mine in Pennsylvania
I can't even.
in this day and age.
Right.
It's like hundreds of workers, mountains of files, a slow elevator.
Oh, my God.
It takes months to process a single retirement.
It's like something out of a time capsule.
It really is. It's crazy.
But it's a perfect example of what DOGE is trying to highlight.
Okay, so...
Not necessarily fraud,
Okay.
but just massive inefficiency.
Okay.
It's not about stealing money.
Right.
It's about these systems that are so outdated.
So bloated.
Yeah, practically fossilized.
Makes you wonder how much time and money could be saved
Exactly.
if they just modernize things.
100%. And it makes you wonder what other bizarre stuff is burking.
Yeah, what else is down there?
Right. Deep in the bureaucracy.
Well, there's that thing with the EPA.
Oh, yeah.
Finding $20 billion in wasted funds.
Under the Biden administration.
Even the EPA thinks that's a lot of waste.
Right. What was going on there?
What was that all about?
It seems like the issue wasn't so much fraud,
Okay.
but more like disagreement about how the money was spent.
Okay, so what were they spending it on?
Climate change initiatives.
Okay.
Environmental justice programs.
Stuff that DOGE probably sees as wasteful,
Probably.
but other people might think is essential.
Exactly.
So it's not just about finding missing money.
Right.
It's also about whose priorities are being reflected
Is.
in how the government spends its money.
Yep. Raises a whole other set of questions, doesn't it?
It really does. And then there's that whole thing with FEMA.
FEMA.
Sending $59.3 million to New York City
Oh, yeah. For what?
for migrant hotel costs.
Okay.
Which was apparently against a presidential order.
Interesting.
And as soon as DOGE exposed it,
Yeah.
DHS took the money back.
Wow. So
Immediately.
they do have some impact.
It seems like they do.
Even if it's not always about massive fraud.
Right, more about accountability.
Yeah, making sure agencies are following the rules.
Makes you wonder, though,
What?
how much of this is about actual efficiency
Right.
and how much is about pushing a specific agenda?
Hmm.
Are they just going after programs they don't like?
That's a good question.
Even if those programs are technically legal and effective?
That is a question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah.
And it's something we'll definitely explore further.
Okay.
As we look at some of the more serious accusations that DOGE has made.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's get into it.
All right, so let's talk about some of those more serious accusations.
Okay.
We're talking about potential fraud, maybe even involving terrorist groups.
Right. This is where things get a little murkier.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, where the line gets blurred between efficiency and politics?
Yeah.
Remember that initial analysis DOGE put out?
Yeah.
Musk was making some pretty strong claims.
He was.
It's about the Treasury approving payments to fraudulent entities,
Right.
even suggesting there might be links to terrorist groups.
That's a huge accusation.
Yeah, and so far they haven't provided any specific cases or dollar amounts
Oh, really?
to back those claims up.
So it's just a lot of talk at this point?
It's raised eyebrows, let's just say that.
Yeah, bet.
And, you know, it's important to note that without any concrete evidence,
Yeah.
these claims are just that, claims.
Claims, right. Okay, so we're in wait-and-see mode on that one.
I think so.
But while we're on the topic of questionable spending, you mentioned earlier that the Pentagon has a history of waste.
Oh, yeah?
Didn't I read something about $1,000 coffee cups?
Yeah, those stories were from older audits, though.
Okay.
Not directly related to what DOGE is finding.
Okay.
But we are talking about things like $1,300 coffee cups.
$1,300 for a coffee cup.
Soap dispensers with 8,000% markups.
What?
You know, the kind of stuff that makes taxpayers wonder where their money's going?
That's insane.
Yeah, it sounds absurd.
Yeah.
But those were isolated incidents.
Okay, so is DOGE finding anything like that?
It's hard to say at this point. They're
Okay.
definitely digging into the Pentagon's budget,
Yeah.
but they haven't released any findings that rival those older examples of waste. But the fact that those past issues existed,
Right.
it makes it easier for people to believe DOGE's claims.
Yeah, I guess so, even without hard proof.
Exactly.
It seems like they're walking a tightrope.
They are.
They're making big accusations, but they need evidence.
They need the receipts.
They need receipts if they want to maintain credibility.
Right. And speaking of tightropes,
Oh, here we go.
let's talk about the legal challenges DOGE is facing.
Oh, this is where things get messy.
Messy is putting it mildly. DOGE's has been controversial.
Yeah,
From the start,
it seems like,
you know, it was set up through a presidential executive order.
right?
And that's led to a lot of questions about its legal authority.
So it's not just about whether their findings are accurate.
No.
It's about whether they even have the right to be doing what they're doing.
Exactly. We're talking about over a dozen lawsuits filed against DOGE.
Okay.
Mostly by unions, watchdog groups, and Democratic-led states.
So they're not messing around.
Nope. They're raising some serious concerns about DOGE's methods and motives.
Okay, so what are they worried about specifically?
One of the biggest concerns is DOGE's authority.
Okay.
They're digging into sensitive systems, proposing to terminate contracts,
Mm-hmm.
even suggesting shutting down entire agencies.
Wow.
So the lawsuits are challenging whether DOGE has the power to do all that.
It makes sense that people are worried.
It does.
It seems like they've been given a lot of leeway.
A lot.
And maybe they're overstepping their boundaries.
That's the argument.
What else are the lawsuits focusing on?
Transparency, or rather the lack thereof,
Oh, yeah.
that's a major concern.
Okay.
Critics are arguing that DOGE is operating in secret,
Right.
potentially hiding conflicts of interest.
You know, with Elon Musk running things,
Exactly.
he's got a vested interest in
Right.
his own companies doing well.
Mm-hmm.
So if DOGE cuts government contracts,
Uh-huh.
it's not hard to imagine
Right.
those contracts ended up with companies like Tesla or SpaceX.
That's the fear.
And it's a valid fear.
It's fueling a lot of these lawsuits.
Yeah. And then there's the whole privacy issue.
Oh, right.
They have access to so much data,
Tons of it.
including personal information about federal employees.
It's a lot of sensitive stuff.
Yeah, people are worried that this data could be misused or, put at risk.
Absolutely. So we've got concerns about their power,
Right.
their transparency,
Uh-huh.
their handling of sensitive data.
Yeah,
It's a lot for the courts to sort out.
it really is. So what have been the outcomes of these legal challenges so far?
Well, it's been a bit of a back and forth. There
Yeah.
have been some wins for DOGE's opponents, for example.
Yeah.
Courts has blocked DOGE from accessing certain treasury systems
Okay.
and from interfering with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
So there are some checks and balances in place.
For now.
Okay, good to know.
But DOGE has had some victories, too.
Like,
A judge allowed their fork-in-the-road buyout program to proceed in Massachusetts.
what was that again?
It's basically a voluntary buyout program
Right.
designed to encourage federal employees to leave their jobs.
So like early retirement kind of thing.
Yeah, it's part of their strategy to reduce the size of the federal workforce.
Right, which they argue is bloated and inefficient.
Exactly.
So it seems like the legal battles are still going strong,
They are
and the courts are still trying to figure out.
trying to figure out where to draw the line with DOGE's authority.
This whole thing is a fascinating legal battle.
It really is.
It gets to the heart of some really fundamental questions about our government.
Absolutely.
Where does executive power end?
Right.
Where does legislative oversight begin?
How much transparency should we demand?
Yeah, exactly. And how do we balance efficiency
Mm-hmm.
with protecting individual rights?
These questions.
Huge. And while the courts are figuring all that out,
Yeah.
DOGE is still hard at work,
They're not slowing down.
digging into that federal budget,
Uh-huh.
looking for more ways to cut costs.
It seems like
And they're
that.
not just focused on the big stuff.
Right.
Remember that Newsweek article?
Yeah.
That listed all the agencies DOGE has targeted?
Oh, yeah, that was a long list.
A long list. It's one thing to say you're going to cut waste.
Right.
But it's another thing to actually go after so many different agencies.
Absolutely.
But are these cuts actually making a real difference?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's hard to say right now
Right.
what the true impact is.
Yeah.
Some might argue that even if the immediate savings are small,
Mm-hmm.
DOGE is forcing agencies to be more accountable, to justify their spending,
Mm-hmm.
which could lead to some long-term changes.
Right. So even if they're not finding tons of wasted money,
Yeah.
they're at least making people think twice
Exact. It's like they're putting everyone under a microscope.
and saying, prove it.
Prove that you need this money.
Yeah, that kind of scrutiny.
It can be a powerful motivator for change,
It can.
even if it doesn't result in immediate cuts.
Okay.
It forces agencies to reevaluate their priorities
Right.
and find more efficient ways to do their jobs.
So we've got DOGE shaking things up, uncovering inefficiencies,
Uh-huh.
making bold claims and facing legal challenges.
It's a whirlwind of activity.
It really is. But what does it all mean for the average person?
Right.
How does this actually impact our lives?
That's a good question. And I think to answer it, we need to zoom out a bit.
Okay.
Look at the bigger picture. This isn't just about dollars and cents.
Okay, what is it about then?
It's about the fundamental role of government,
Uh-huh.
the balance of power,
Okay.
and the potential for technology to reshape how our government works.
All right, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. Okay, big picture time. Hit me with it. What are the long-term consequences of all this?
Well, one of the things that makes this whole DOGE situation so fascinating
Mm-hmm.
is how it raises some really fundamental questions about our government.
Okay, like what?
Like, if they actually manage to find trillions of dollars in savings.
Okay, and that's a big if at this point.
It is big if.
But let's say they do. What happens to all that money?
Exactly. Where does it go? Do we use it to pay down the national debt?
Okay.
Do we invest it in things like infrastructure or education?
Right.
Do we give it back to taxpayers through tax cuts or rebates?
Those are some big decisions.
Huge. And honestly, I'm not even sure who gets to make those decisions.
Right. Is that something DOGE gets to decide, or does it go back to Congress?
That's a gray area, isn't it?
It seems like it.
And it's part of what's driving those legal challenges.
Okay.
Critics are arguing that DOGE is overstepping its authority.
Yeah.
That these decisions should be made by Congress.
Right, through the normal legislative process.
Exactly, not by some task force appointed by the president.
It makes sense that people would be worried about that.
It does.
It seems like DOGE's been given a lot of power.
A lot.
And it's not always clear where the limits are.
Right. And then there's the whole transparency issue.
Yeah.
If we let DOGE operate in secrecy,
Right.
does that set a dangerous precedent for future administrations?
That's a good question.
Could we see more and more government functions being outsourced to private companies?
Right.
With very little oversight.
Yeah, and could that lead to a situation
Where efficiency is prioritized
Yeah.
over accountability?
over transparency?
These are questions we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, as this whole DOGE thing plays out,
As this experiment unfolds,
it sounds like DOGE's impact could go way beyond just cutting the budget.
I think so.
It could fundamentally change how our government operates.
For better or for worse.
Exactly. So the big question is, what do you think about all this?
What do our listeners think?
What are your thoughts on DOGE's mission, their methods, their potential impact on the future of our government?
Let us know.
Yeah, I'm still processing everything, to be honest.
Me too.
I like the idea of making the government more efficient,
Yeah.
cutting waste.
But,
I'm also concerned about the lack of transparency,
right.
the potential conflicts of interest, and, the possibility of unintended consequences.
Absolutely. It's a complicated issue.
It is.
With a lot of different angles.
And it's still evolving.
Oh, yeah.
The legal battles are ongoing. DOGE is still investigating. The
Yeah.
public debate is just heating up.
This story is far from over.
It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It will.
All right. Well, on that note,
Yeah.
I think we've officially reached peak brain capacity.
For one episode.
I've covered a lot of ground today,
Ah.
from bizarre spending habits to complex legal challenges. And we've only just scratched the surface of what DOGE is up to.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into DOGE and the world of the federal budget.
It's always a wild ride.
It is. Keep those thinking caps on because, like we said,
This story's far from over.
far from over.